bulrush, you find a basket, and in the basket is a baby. Sound familiar? Okay. And so she takes this child home and raises her own child. Now, this is a situation that Freud talked about, of course, the very strong attachment of a son to the mother. Right? What did he call it?
Oedipus.
That's correct. Oedipus complex. Right. And so she and her son Attis, then they're very strongly bonded together because there's no husband. There's just the two of them. She never apparently got married, and she raised the boy, and she was with him. And you've heard of a helicopter mother, right? Like that, only more so, right? There's an expression in Europe. I love this expression. Mamzer. We were in Italy a few years ago, and we were talking to one of the tour guides about mamzers. So, I took the bait. What's a mamzer? And he said, a mamzer is a young man who gets to be about 21, still at home. And he doesn't leave home. 25, 30, 35, he stays home. And he and mom are real close. Oftentimes there's no father, or the father is kind of marginal on the fringe. But the boy stays home under the auspices of taking care of the mother. And the mother cooks the meals, cleans clothes, cleans up his room, takes care of all the things. And he'll have a job, he'll have a girlfriend, but he lives at home. See? And there's so many of these in Italy, and in Europe generally. They call them mamzers, right? Because they're stuck to mom. And then they don't get married until what happens?
Mom dies.
Mom dies. Then all of a sudden, they open their eyes. There's some nice women out there, So then they look for mom. In a woman who would take care of them, when they get old and decrepit. And there are women thrilled to do it, see? So they, lo and behold, pretty soon they get married again, right? Now, Cybele had this son who is a fine young man. And they were devoted, and certainly he loved her. And yet, when he got to be around 20-something, he starts taking interest in girls. This is not unusual, right? This is very usual. But one day, he sees the love of his life, and he falls hook, line, and sinker, and he is smitten, and decides that this is going to be the one he's going to marry her. Okay? But remember, what we think of as dating, and a boy and a girl deciding together going to be married, didn't really exist. What existed is what we call contract marriages. The families, come together. So the families have to say yes or no, to a relationship. So he goes to his mom. There is no dad. He goes to his mom and says, Mom, you're going to be so happy for me. I have fallen in love with Sally, and she is just absolutely, come on, through. Sit over here. Go ahead, come and have a seat, please.
I've got to
Okay.
go be for a few minutes.
Okay, all right. So he says, you'll just be so happy, Mom. I found the perfect girl. You're going to love her. And all of a sudden, Cybele, there's never been another man in her life, right? She can't believe it. She can't believe it that her son would want to leave her. But the thing is about Cybele, remember royalty, divinity, remember this thing? She has power to make things happen. And so she exercises this power because she goes into this deep depression. And the only way she can think to get herself out of it is by end the relationship. Now, I don't think it's a great stretch to say there's been many a mother that's tried to end the relationship of a son with a girl, right? But in this case, the mother just can't imagine living without her son, as. So, she puts a magic spell on him. Here it comes. That he will fall in love with her and forget about the girl. Okay? This is sounding more and more like Oedipus, isn't it? And so he does. He just all of a sudden becomes totally devoted to the mother. And the girl, he forgets about the girl. But you've heard of unintended consequences? This is what happens. So he gets so wrapped up in his mother that he decides he's going to spend his life as a priestess of his mother. Right? Now he's a man. How's he going to become a priestess? He's a man. How's he going to become a female? So, one dark and stormy night, he is under a sacred pine tree. And this pine tree, he takes out his Bowie knife.
Oh, gosh.
And he decides to end his masculinity. This is not a real smart thing to do. It's not. So he dies. He dies under the pine tree, bleeding. And the concept of the blood going into your earth, this is the concept, of course, libation. In other words, this is going to be at the centerpiece of the religion. All right? So the mother can't find her son. Eventually she finds him dead under the pine tree, right? So she is now completely destroyed. She realizes what she did caused all this. So she's going to make up for it. So on the third day, she raises him from the dead. Well, of course, now he's not a guy. He's a female, right? And so they then, she puts him in charge of heaven, and they then now will rule together, this mother goddess and her son. Now, the followers of this religion, they every year then, in the 1st of April, they act out this whole thing, right? So you have, first of all, the bulrushes. So a week before the resurrection of Attis, a week before, they go through the street waving bulrushes. Why bulrushes? Because they found him in bulrushes. In other words, he's a foundling. He doesn't have a birthday, right? So his foundling day, the day he's found, becomes his birthday, right? And so then they have, then on Friday, this would be like a week before. So on Friday, they have the Day of Blood. This is the blood, of course, is the blood of Attis that has paid for the sins of the people. All right? Keep this in mind. So they have the Day of the Blood. Now this is the day. I almost hesitate to tell you this, but I know. On that day, that's when the men who want to become priestesses, they're called Galli. They have a whole ceremony. They get in a pit. Above the pit, there are these boards that they can put a bowl on. then they slit the throat of the bull, and all this blood pours on the men down below. And when all that blood is down there, then that's when they're castrated, right? And they become then
Castrati.
castrati. Well, yes, exactly. Because the whole idea of the castrati, of course, is to be castrated before your voice changed, so you can sing all these beautiful notes. By the way, they were still, Roman Catholic Church was still allowing castratos, castration of young boys, into the 20th century. They have a recording, an Edison recording of the last castrato. I've heard it. It's an amazing thing to hear, because it doesn't sound like a man. It doesn't sound like a woman. It's something very different. And so anyway, these Galli then would they had a whole ceremony. They had to give their I'm going to try to find a word here. Private parts. They would change their private parts with a family who would give them a wig, makeup, lipstick, so they look like women, and they would give them a female name. Right? So that all happened on the Day of Blood. And then on Sunday, you have the Hilaria. We have one word from this. The word is hilarious. Now, hilarious has come to mean like a joke. It was so funny it was hilarious, right? But really what hilarious originally means in Latin is great joy, great happiness. Just wonderful. And so the Hilaria is to celebrate the resurrection of, on Sunday, of Addis from the dead, and then sitting at the right hand of his mother. Right? Does that sound familiar? Any of this? And then I want to talk about the pine tree. The pine tree under which he died. So, on the Day of Blood, one of the things they would do that day, they would have a special forest of pine trees they had grown. Right? Pine trees grow well in Italy. And they would go out, this small little tree, and then they would cut these trees, some of them, and take them back into their homes and decorate them. And they'd put little effigies of Cybele, of Addis, on the tree. Little symbols of this religion, right? And one of those, of course, were the private parts of Addis, which we think of today as Christmas ball. I told you, I warned you ahead of time, you weren't going to believe any of it, right? But you can certainly look it up. But the thing was, this was part of the whole thing, was to bring the tree into the home and to honor them. And then the tree would be there for the Hilaria. See? Now, the parallels to Christianity are astonishing. Astonishing. Because, see, Day of Blood, the Good Friday, the Hilaria, Easter, Resurrection. The pine tree, of course, as it gets associated with Christmas and the birth of Jesus. But they had no birthday because, again, he's a foundling, Addis. And it really, by the way, it's not really a religion about Addis. It's really a religion about Cybele. But how she made a mistake. Let's put it that way. Normally, gods don't make mistakes, but she made a mistake, and then how that mistake is rectified. And so, guess who follow this religion? Women, or men that want to become women, right? Now, do you suppose this was a popular religion? Strangely enough, very popular. See, so you have two tracks. In Rome, you have the track of the official Roman religion. You know, Zeus and Hera and all the brothers and sisters of Zeus and then all the children, right? These are called the Olympian gods. You have that, and then over here you have the mystery religions. Now, besides this famous Great Mother cult, you also have one called Mithraism. The cult of Isis, the cult of who's the god of music? Who's the god of music? Anybody?
Dionysus?
Huh?
Dionysus?
Dionysus, god of wine. But by the way, Dionysus was
Orpheus?
huh?
Isn't Orpheus?
Orpheus, yes, Orpheus. Thank you. These are just various mystery religions that are imported into the Rome. See, so Rome, you can as long as you're willing to give honor to the emperor, right? Which amounts to taking an offering into a temple and just putting it down. And that's about all they expected. As long as you're willing to do that. And that wasn't all emperors, just some emperors demanded to be worshipped. You could practice whatever religion you wanted to. See? So this idea of a multiplicity of religions and points of view, this is very much what we do today. And that's why Americans, like so many medieval people, wanted to be thought of as Roman, you see, because of this kind of freedom. Now, the Mithraism was a religion primarily for men. Isis was men and women. Dionysus was primarily women. Orpheus was men and women. In other words, these religions tended to gravitate toward one sex or the other. And so, why is that important? I mean, who cares, right? Because of this. Hello, White Buffalo.
Just struggling to come through. We need to see you. How you been?
Good to see you, buddy. This is the famous John Lipinski, who is dressed way down today.
That's right.
Way down.
I got my purple shoes and my blue carnation.
I've never seen you so dull.
I got to beat this guy up. I haven't seen this guy since 1905. How you been?
Anyway, here's the point. Christianity comes on the scene in many ways at the absolutely perfect time, because the Romans were very used to having imported religion. In other words, they didn't come in. And so what you have to understand, and this is something that very, very few people, I think, appreciate, is that Christianity was just another mystery religion from the standpoint of the Romans. So it comes in early, about 40 AD into Rome, 30 AD, something like this. We don't know exactly when Peter got there, when Paul got there. But it's a very, very important detail to appreciate and understand that the Romans were very accepting of other religious points of view. See? And the Jews weren't terribly persecuted. The Christians were not persecuted really hardly at all until Diocletian, the emperor. And by that time, Diocletian was worried not about so much Christianity as a religion, but Christianity as a political force. Because the Christians were not loyal to the emperor, at least in his estimation. Now, never mind, Jesus said, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, and unto God the things that are God's." Some emperors got very worried about this. And Diocletian, of course, was so worried that he tried literally to destroy Christianity in this way. If you were declared Christian, that was a death sentence. You would be executed. Of course, a lot of people said, "No, not me. No, I've never been a Christian." But that was a very, very hard time for Christianity. But Christianity was already becoming percentage of the population. It's estimated by the time you get to Constantine, Christianity is up maybe 20% of the population. And it becomes huge. And then once Constantine takes on Christianity, and it then becomes the official state religion of Rome, all these other state religion of Rome and mystery religions are wiped out. And that's essentially how it happened. Now I want to talk about, my time is, Carolyn's not here yet, she
I'm
is.
here. Yeah, you got about
2 minutes?
about 10.
Oh, about 10, okay. Good. There are 3 people I want to talk about. There are 3 people I want to talk about. Remember, all of this is the sunrise of Christianity. So there are 3 other people that we need to talk about that are crucially important in the coming of Christianity. It isn't just this mystery religion thing, but it's also these other people. Now, the first, of course, is the very famous Alexander the Great. Now, Alexander the Great is, oftentimes the word great shouldn't be applied to, Catherine the Great. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. But Alexander was truly amazing, extraordinary. And so he probably deserves the title, Alexander the Great. Now, why is he so important? And what is it that caused Alexander to literally change Western culture, civilization? Well, first of all, when Alexander the Great goes out to conquer, he uses what we talked about last week, the phalanx. And so the phalanx, he's an expert at the phalanx. And then he's also good at cavalry. Anyway, cavalry, the using of the phalanx to break through the line. And then as soon as the phalanx get through, the horses go through, right? And the knights, the equestrian troops, and this is how Alexander conquered over a 10-year period just a vast swath of all the way to India. It was an enormous conquest. But anyway, he went. The key conquests are these. He eventually gets over into Asia. By Asia, in those days, referring to crossing over into what is today Turkey and Syria and Jordan and so forth. And the legend is that the Jews knew that he was coming. The Jews, of course, are just teeny little pocket country, and they opened the doors. And there's some issue whether or not he actually went into Jerusalem, but he certainly was happy not to have to fight the Jews. Of course, then later the Romans do have to fight the Jews, but for whatever reason, the Jews realized this is not going to be viable for us. So Alexander comes in and brings with him Greek culture, goes into Egypt. Now in Egypt, this is where Greek culture really takes place. And of the 72 cities founded by Alexander, all called Alexandria. Only one today is called Alexandria, and that, of course, is in Egypt. And Alexandria then became, for a time, the great center of learning for the world. And the great Alexandrian Library, of course, we all know about. But all the great innovations that were done there. And this is called, this world that was left by Alexander the Great, called the Hellenistic world. Now the Hellenistic world, Hellenes, of course, that means Greek. The Hellenistic world had developed its own separate Greek culture and their own separate Greek language called Koinonia Greek. Now, Koinonia Greek, really, really important to understand that the Jews eventually get to the point where nobody is understanding Hebrew. In other words, they're having a lot of trouble speaking Hebrew. Many of them have already been speaking Aramaic. Now, Aramaic is very closely related to Hebrew, so that's not much of a jump. But a jump over into Greek, this was a big jump. So into Alexandria, the Jews would move in much the way people today would go to Silicon Valley in California, right? That was the place to be. And it's estimated that up to 1 million Jews lived in this one city. Huge city. But it's very, very important. Now, there in Alexandria, there was the ruler, his name Ptolemy. Now, when Alexander the Great died, his great empire was divided into 3 parts. And the prize was Egypt. Because why? Because Egypt is so rich. You can always, because you have fresh water, you have good soil, you can always grow anything you need. And so General Ptolemy was given Egypt. This was considered the great prize. And then he ruled from Alexandria, right? The Ptolemies ruled then now for the next, if I can figure this out, for the next 300 years. Who was the last? Anybody know who the very last Ptolemy ruler of Egypt was? You all know. You just don't know, you know. Jim?
Cleopatra.
Cleopatra. Okay. Cleopatra is a Ptolemy. Famous for her beauty and her red hair. By the way, she didn't have red hair. She dyed it with henna. But that's what all the Egyptian women had done. In fact, royalty. There's a famous mummy of Ramses the Great, right? And he still has some of his, he's bald, but he still has some hair back here. Guess what color it is? Red. Was it red, natural red? No, it's because of henna. But you see, if you were walking down the street and saw somebody walking along with red hair, you'd know immediately they're royalty. But if they're royalty, they're also what? Divinity. See, this is crucial, even down among the Greeks. These Ptolemies were worshipped like gods, right? And one Ptolemy was a scientist. Remember the Ptolemaic universe, right? Anyway, I'm going to have to wrap this. Ptolemy was very close to connected with the Jewish community in Alexandria. And he was very much liked their scripture. And of course, the heart of Jewish scripture is the Torah. We call, of course, the Torah the first 5 books of the Bible, sometimes called the Pentateuch, the Torah. And so he said, you folks have complained that you're not able to read your scripture anymore because you can read, you've learned Greek, you can read Greek, but you haven't studied Hebrew. And so I'm willing to help you because I would very much like to be able to read the Torah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And he said, I'll pay for it. Okay? So he pays for it. And this translation is called the Septuagint. Septua means 7. Yet means 10 times, so it's 7 times 10, the 70, the Septuagint. Why 70? Because there were 70 translators who translated the Torah into the Septuagint. And you say, okay, so what? Now, so the Septuagint then is written not in classic Greek, but in Koinonia Greek, right? And this Koinonia Greek is very important because this is the translation that Jesus used. You say, how do you know that? Because when Jesus quotes the Old Testament, when he quotes the Torah, he does not quote from the Hebrew, but directly from the Septuagint. What does this tell you? This tells me that it's quite possible that Jesus spoke Greek. Right? We know he spoke Aramaic, because in the Bible it says from the cross, he goes into Aramaic. But Aramaic was the language of that area, the lingua franca of that area at that time. Hebrew was really only used in the synagogue, dying out. But what are the chances he spoke Greek? Well, since the New Testament is virtually all in Greek, and the words of Jesus are all in Greek. But they're in the Greek, they're in the Koinonia Greek, where he uses the very words from the Septuagint. So this is an important point to make. So Christianity comes into the scene when the Septuagint is now spread out in the Greek world, so they know about this. So then when the gospel comes along, it's written in Koinonia Greek, and it spreads to the Greek world. And this is also propitious because the Eastern world is still, even though they've been conquered by the Romans, they're still speaking Greek, whereas the Western part is all speaking Latin. But it doesn't take long for St. Jerome to come along and translate it from the Septuagint, from Koinonia Greek into the Greek New Testament. Okay, so we're going to continue. I started with one man, Alexander the Great. I have two more I've got to talk to you about next week, and we'll see. Then we'll start to transition into how Christianity is able to come into this world. It's a great story. There's more to tell than I have time to tell, but we'll get to as much as we can. So thank you for coming. I'll see you next week.